All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Matt Pfeiffer. You are here for Conversations on Retail. We're super excited today to be kicking off a brand new series that's going to be digging into Web3, NFTs, and the Metaverse, and what it all means to consumer brands. We're excited to spend some time getting to know Joel Ponce from Paramount. He is someone who would say that he is not an expert on the subject, but he is very much a student and is spending an awful lot of time traveling and learning and interacting with other folks in the field, and has an awful lot of cool things to share. So a couple things before we get started. The purpose of Conversations on Retail is to create dialogue, not for us just to sit through yet another presentation, but we want to facilitate open discussions. And so I hope as you have questions, you will click on the Q&A button within Zoom and submit those questions. And then as the time becomes appropriate to do so, we will ask those questions of Joel, and hopefully have some really great dialogue. The second thing I would say is that we are trying to create community within the community. So within the supplier community, you've got practitioners and all sorts of areas, shopper marketing and supply chain and e-commerce, et cetera. So what we hope to see is that this group of folks, Joel is kicking off this series today with Meta What, but he's also going to be doing on a monthly basis a get together to dig into more and more of the details, and we hope to see you and a lot of the other folks. So Joel, thank you so much for making the time to visit with us today. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is. If you've got questions, if you want to contribute insight, something you've experienced, best practices, some of the experimentation your company is doing, hit that Q&A and chime in. Joel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Matt, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm excited to chat with everyone, and this is, I think, probably the most interesting time to chat about things like this because it is so early. The reality is the rules are still being written. We can provide a lot of observations of what's going on and what we believe is working at the moment. But I think it would be naive to say that there's a perfect rule book at this point. That said, Matt, I'm going to try to share my screen and let me know if this works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else, but let's see if this works. So we're going to kick it off today with what I'll consider a high-level overview of this space. So we're going to talk Web3, NFTs, and the Metaverse. I don't think you can truly dive deep into any without talking about the others. So this is by no means all-encompassing, but this is there to give you a little bit of a primer of what's going on and maybe why, and then we can have a discussion about what you're seeing, what's of interest, what questions you have, all the above. Typical disclaimers, none of it's financial advice, opinions are my own type of thing, and still very early, so a lot of rules yet to be written, but let's dive in. So as we get into it, there's a funny meme in this space. It's the whole Web 2 me versus Web 3 me. So that's Web 2 me, Director of Sales at Paramount. And then Web 3 me, this is one of my avatars, if you will. This is a part of the CloneX ecosystem, which is Artifact Studios, which was actually acquired by Nike. And we'll actually talk about that as one of the examples later on. But let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So high level, we're going to talk about what is this, meaning Web3, NFTs, and the Metaverse. Why does it matter? How to get involved, retailer news and headlines, brands entering the space, the future of commerce, and then some things that I believe could be coming soon. I'll try to power through some of this as well to make sure we have time for Q&A. So make sure you write any notes or questions you may have. So what is it? Let's take it one bite-sized piece at a time. This is admittedly such a big space that if you don't, it could be overwhelming. So the most simplified way to define this in my mind is an immersive, wallet-aware internet that recognizes and rewards ownership. So let's break it down. Web 3, what the hell is Web 1? What's Web 2? Now Web 3. So Web 1, the way it's defined is really the read internet. This is when you were just able to access information to consume information. You were just literally reading information that was provided to you. Web 2 was read and write. Now you were able to communicate back via social media, for the most part, e-commerce played a big role in Web 2 as well. We're debatably towards the back half of Web 2, moving into Web 3. Web 3 is read, write, and own. So because of the blockchain, you now have verifiable ownership of certain digital assets. The blockchain now facilitates you to create markets of intangibles, and you can verify the ownership of that and then reward that. So if you have a brand that gives you a particular NFT, and they can verify that that's their legitimate NFT, they can give you access to certain experiences. And we'll talk about some examples there. Without going too much deeper on that part at the moment, though, a different way to look at it is the different ways that you sign in to these different ecosystems. So Web 1, username and password. Web 2, often signing in via your social media accounts. And Web 3, you're going to often sign in via your wallets. Now, there's a lot of friction in this space. I suspect we are going to have much more simplified ways of signing into these ecosystems sooner rather than later. But at the moment, I think it's probably fair to say that we're starting to move into what I'll call a Web 2.5. People are starting to implement versions of Web 3. We're still very heavy into Web 2, and I actually think that's okay. So we'll touch on that. NFTs, not going to get super deep here, but I would just define them as programmable digital assets. The actual term stands for non-fungible tokens. I think that's more confusing than it's worth. Think of them as a programmable digital asset. At the most basic level, you can program royalties on it. Every time that asset is sold, whoever, the creator, the brand, whatever, can get royalties forever. Now, this is a whole, supply and demand conversation, which we'll touch on, but they're generally broken down in multiple categories. Some are considered historic because they were really early in the crypto native movement. So CryptoPunks being that. Some are literally just art. So this is a piece by Dmitry Cherniak. Then some are starting to build what I'll consider a Web3 media company. So Bored Ape Yacht Club is certainly trying to tackle that in a big way. They're also considered PFPs, so what a CryptoPunk, so personal profile pic. This is now serving as an avatar or representation of this person in the metaverse. You have some membership tokens. These are becoming more and more interesting. And then brands getting into the space, and they can touch on any or all of these, frankly. Now we'll get into the metaverse. This is actually, I would say, the most confusing out of them all. And maybe to get to the true vision of the metaverse, it's also the furthest out, because a lot has to happen from a technological standpoint to give us the true immersive experience that people talk about in Ready Player One or in Snow Crash, the book. So Matthew Ball has an incredible stab at a definition. The reason I say that is it's actually not defined, but I would summarize it by saying it's immersive worlds that can be experienced continuously all at the same time. So there are both centralized and decentralized virtual worlds. Think of Roblox or even Fortnite, Minecraft, things like that as centralized virtual worlds. And that meaning Roblox as a company literally owns this and control. It's a walled garden. They do what they want to do with their brand partners and everybody in their ecosystem, but they define the rules. They control everything. It's probably often considered a more brand safe environment. It is by no means perfect, but certainly there's more control there. A decentralized virtual world are examples like Sandbox or Decentraland or Somnium Space. You also have On Cyber creating really interesting things right now. None of this is an all-encompassing list, but it does give you an example and a preview of some of the things happening in the space. So these are some of the companies building each layer of the metaverse. So the infrastructure, the access, the visualization tools, virtual worlds, the payment infrastructure, the virtual fashion, all the above. A lot going on. Now, decentralized virtual worlds are owned by the users. So you could literally buy a plot of land and you define what is in that plot of land. It is verifiable on the blockchain and you can build whatever you want. Some of them have certain, what I'll call, the more plots of land, the bigger you can build. It's, certain guidelines, but generally speaking, you can do what you want in those spaces. Now, why does it matter? These are some thoughts, by no means all encompassing, but I think these are the ones that are the most interesting from a brand perspective. Number one, smart contracts via NFTs facilitate the creation of perpetual markets. So because you can program a royalty into this, you have now created a system that you can get paid forever. Now, from an artist and creator standpoint, this is also incredible. Like now a musician or, a digital artist, painter, whatever, they may not have to go through a middleman now. They may be able to go directly to their fan base, sell them an NFT, get the payment of the original cost of the NFTs and royalties anytime that NFT is traded without a middleman. This is going to be really, really big, both for brands and individual creators. You also have the ability to verify ownership and authenticity of an asset. This, at the current state, is most evident in two categories. I would say ticketing being one of them. This is a legitimate ticket that ties back to the original contract of whoever issued the ticket. And then there's also ownership of high-end luxury goods. So just like you have Dolce & Gabbana, Prada, whatever, bags, and having, rip-off versions of those, you know what's real and what's not real in this virtual ecosystem. That allows you to then have token-gated engagement and experiences. I can now say for those that have a Super Bowl NFT ticket, because they provided those for the latest Super Bowl, I will give them access to this, really interesting and luxurious party after the Super Bowl is over, or whatever it may be. This ecosystem at its native state allows for co-development and co-ownership as well. So this part is interesting because I suspect you're going to have brands really exploring both the Web3 native route as well as not. I'll give an example of the NBA. When they developed their Top Shots platform with Dapper Labs, they're not giving any ownership to the users or the buyers of those NFTs. You have it as a collectible, but you can't commercialize it. I expect most major brands will probably take that approach, but you're also going to have some Web3 native brands that are created. So people will create new IP. What is also interesting about the space is the speed of digital innovation and product development. You're not dependent on supply chain. You're also not bound by the laws of gravity. So when you're seeing people create metaverse worlds and buildings, they can now do things more imaginatively than they could have before. Same thing with digital fashion. You're starting to see some really interesting and innovative pieces. Even the concept of size in this world is interesting. You don't have to have medium, large, small, whatever. You could have a particular dress that fits the size of the avatar by itself. It just knows what the size of the avatar is. Additionally, you have access to new customer segments, especially early on. Most of the community at the moment is what I would consider crypto native. That is expanding more and more. But at the moment, you really would be looking at a new customer segment. And the reason I call it new-ish verticals and a market opportunity is you're starting to also see certain brands expand into categories they may not have been before. Now, the example of brands that have done things like this before are, say, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola obviously sells beverages, but they are also an icon in culture and society. There's apparel of Coca-Cola and people love to wear it. So digital fashion associated with Coca-Cola, you can expect that's likely going to be something that's really big and interesting as well. You have lots of companies that already did it in Web 2.0 that are moving into that in Web 3. And you're going to have some that never explored those ancillary markets that are now going to start thinking, how can my brand come to life in that ecosystem in a new, refreshed, and interesting way? And then you have a direct relationship with your customers via, verifying who is a current token holder, if you will, or not. These are some examples of interesting brands in the space. You'll notice a lot of these early on are entertainment and fashion, but it is moving into CPG slowly. Pepsi was certainly an early mover, and we can talk about that later on in the Q&A, but they actually did a collection that had microphones. I showcased it earlier. It was interesting because it was actually criticized by the market because they were questioning why not soda cans and things like that. But if you know anything about Pepsi, you know that they've always really cared about music culture, and that's really big for them. So you can imagine, can provide access to the people that hold their tokens to really interesting and unique music experiences, maybe a meet and greet with the artist. So all of these brands are going to be able to facilitate access and exclusive merchandise or free merchandise, limited edition merchandise, all of these things. It's a deeper way to engage your customer. So how to get involved? At the most basic level, here's how I break it down. So from an NFT perspective, you have 4 categories: sponsorship, partnership, acquisition, or building your own thing. Sponsorship is, probably the lowest hanging fruit, although I will say it is at the moment, maybe the one that's a little bit risky from a crypto native standpoint, because it could be perceived as a cash grab, or how authentic is it really? Partnership is the one that I've seen be embraced the most for those that do it. So Doodles partnered with Bayer. Adidas partnered with Bored Ape Yacht Club. They had conversations about how to make this a mutually beneficial thing. It wasn't just, I'm going to, put an ad and sponsor you to go to this. They're truly trying to create something deeper that is beneficial for both brands as well as the token holders of those brands. Acquisition, the biggest one we've seen, I guess 2. We don't know exactly how much Nike acquired Artifact Studios for, but that was certainly a big one that probably got every boardroom in America talking about this. And then you also recently had Yuga Labs acquiring the CryptoPunks and Meebits. So that was a Web3 company acquiring other Web3 IP. I suspect we're going to see more and more consolidation soon. In terms of the metaverse, you have both entering current metaverses as well as building your own as the approaches, and I bet people will do both things. In terms of retailer headlines, I'll just highlight 2 key elements that I've seen recently. So in December, I believe, we started to see news about Walmart, making plans to launch their own cryptocurrency and collection of NFTs, talking about selling virtual goods. What I found interesting is a particular quote, how they applied for trademarks for verse to store, verse to curb, verse to home. So just like Walmart has done for decades, they're going to meet their customer where they are, and the customer is starting to move into the space. We obviously see that gaming has expanded exponentially, and it's actually overtaken viewership of things like the NFL. This is very much playing into that. And I think they're now going to allow you to be in this metaverse environment and order anything you need and have it delivered to your home or to the store, et cetera, et cetera. CVS, this one really got me thinking. They filed trademark, for its pharmacy and health clinics in the metaverse, but more importantly, they put patents. They patented its stores to sell virtual goods, including prescription drugs, wellness, beauty, and personal care products. They are also filing for the ability to have non-emergency medical services, as well as nutrition and wellness counseling. So as these retail partners that we work with all the time are diving into the space and they're thinking about this, we will naturally have to think about it as well. Now I'll give you some examples of brands entering the space. Bear Paint, which I mentioned earlier, partnered with Doodles. They actually did a really big IRL activation in over at South by Southwest in Austin. And the CMO talked about, growing Bear's color leadership and expanding our presence across new and emerging platforms remains a priority for the brand. Based on the pastel colors of Doodles, based on the obvious tie-in to Bear Paint, this felt like a very native partnership. This is one that was embraced by the community. So there is benefit to Bear as well as to the local community, and it was not seen as any sort of weird cash grab. This made sense. The moment people saw it, they embraced it. I work at Paramount, and one of our biggest properties within Paramount is Nickelodeon, and we have a lot underneath Nickelodeon, but we actually recently launched the Nickverse within Roblox. So this is a full, what we're going to call a centralized virtual world experience, where we're going to make our property and IP come to life in a way that our fans can now engage with it. They can be a part of that narrative and story and play games along the characters that they know, love, and trust. Nike also built an experience within Roblox. It's called Nike Land. And what I thought was even more interesting is they took that experience into their store in New York City for people to try on different apparel. An analyst actually talked about the fact that there's this whole concept of your digital avatar wearing something and almost people wanting to wear what their digital avatar is wearing in real life. And it's very early stages in that, but we're starting to see that play out certainly within Roblox. This is a decentralized approach of what Nike did when they acquired Artifact Studios. So Artifact Studios was one of the biggest Web3 native brands in the space. And what I love about what they're doing is none of this feels like a one-off campaign. They're truly creating an ecosystem, multiple ecosystems really, and tying all these things together. So they have the avatars. This is now going to become the central hub of their ecosystem, but they also have these different spaces. They're what they're calling their PodX ecosystem. Unlike other metaverses that are out there at the moment, where Decentraland, for example, if you go, it's generally empty almost always, unless there's a big event. That's a problem. That's probably not sustainable long-term. Sandbox isn't really even open. It's an alpha, and it might release, if it doesn't get delayed, Q4 of this year. So there's the promise of the decentralized metaverse. It actually hasn't actualized yet. Now, what I love about this is something they created with On Cyber. These are, for all intents and purposes, galleries. They're an empty canvas that people then decorate. And people are starting to build businesses on top of this. I've started to see people create their own digital store, selling digital furniture and digital art and all sorts of different things to deck out these ecosystems. And this is now, I believe, going to be a part of their new open metaverse partnership they did with Plunk 6529. This monolith, we actually don't know what it is, but this is Nike's first official NFT that was airdropped to people that had other NFTs in the ecosystem. They've talked about this concept of forging items. So let's say you have this clone that has that jacket, they'll allow you to forge that and get a physical version of that sent to your home. So they're tying the digital world with the virtual world. They obviously are going to have gaming experiences as well. These are sample headlines in Ad Age. They actually have a really good thread. It's not all encompassing by any means, but it does showcase other things happening in the space. I highly recommend you go check it out. But you'll start to see, like Patron, for example, had an NFT drop that gives people access to limited tequila bottles. Stella Artois drops generative art NFTs. I've seen certain brands acquire NFTs from women artists, for example, as a way to support them and elevate their work. A lot of brands are taking an approach at the moment, by the way, that the revenue they get from it is given to charity. That I don't think that's going to be the model they take forever, but early on as they're experimenting, I'm starting to see them do that, which is good. One thing I do see brands have thoughts or concerns about is this idea of, Ethereum and, gas fees and, how good is that for the environment or not. Know that there are multiple layers. So Ethereum is a layer 1 solution. You also have Immutable X, or Polygon is a layer 2 solution. You're starting to see more NFTs and layer 2 solutions start to pop up to some extent because of the sustainability conversation, to another extent because gas fees are so high that it just allows you to have a more immersive experience that you could not have in Ethereum. But all of those things will be solved over time. You can also pay to have the energy costs associated that Ethereum created. You can offset that. You have carbon offsets. So you're starting to see some people do that as well. Future of commerce, I'll touch on these. These two are two that I'm starting to see pop up as, I don't want to call them Web3 native, because certainly Fortnite is what I'll consider Web2 in a closed ecosystem. But these are two approaches that I think will play well to this space. Airdrops is essentially sending an NFT, in this case, to a wallet, the wallet of an individual or a bunch of individuals. So as I think about the blockchain from a marketer's perspective, in some ways, I actually think the blockchain is a marketer's dream, because you now have visibility to things that people own. So I could say, I want to reward everybody that owns a World of Women NFT with access to this really special event where they're going to get to meet these cultural icons that, hopefully are important to them. We want to provide them this really cool experience. You can just send them that. Now, at the moment, there are also problems with airdrops. Just so you know, people get sent a lot of spam NFTs that are there for the purpose of actually stealing your other assets. So just like we dealt with spam in email, we're dealing with spam in this space. Technology is super early, a lot has to happen, but I do think airdrops will become a really important mechanism from a marketing perspective, where we would literally give somebody something or allow them to mint something relatively cheap that has value to them within our brand ecosystems. This direct avatar model is also fascinating to me. Kathy Hackle talked about this first, or at least that's where I first heard it. She's considered the godmother of the metaverse. I highly recommend you look up Kathy Hackle. She actually has a really good podcast. I think it's called Metaverse Marketing. Highly encourage you listen to that. But the direct avatar model essentially is, let's say Nickelodeon, we have all sorts of partnerships we've done in Web 2.0. Sometimes we create sneakers with like Adidas or Nike. First, let's say SpongeBob. I might be able to reward everybody that has certain NFTs. Let's say it's a doodle. Everybody that has a doodle will get SpongeBob NFTs randomly generated, whether you get SpongeBob or Squidward or somebody else. That is now me providing value to that community. If that's something that they care about. If they don't, they can sell it. And I can now start to learn natively within their ecosystem versus forcing something upon them. This idea of partnership and leading with value in this space, I think is going to be really, really important. These are other examples we've started to see happen. Some of these last year, some of these this year, but Burrito Maze on Roblox, I love the name of it. Chipotle created this store environment where you dressed up, Halloween outfit, your avatar, and then you went inside the Chipotle store and you actually had the ability to get either free, a ticket or a coupon really for free meal or discounted meal that you were able to claim in the physical stores. So they were able to drive commerce for QSR in real life via this gaming experience and environment. The other thing that I thought was fascinating towards the end of last year was VFriends, which is a Web3 native property that's getting created. This is part of Gary Vaynerchuk's ecosystem. But what I thought was incredible, not that it happened, because I knew these things would happen. I was just surprised how fast it happened, is that he was able to partner with a company like Mattel to create a limited edition collection of Uno in this case. So you're starting to see Web3 native IP make it into the traditional ecosystem via licensing deals and merchandising. Just like, again, whether it's us, Nickelodeon or Universal, Warner Brothers, doesn't matter. You're going to see our IP across the whole retail storefront. Most probably won't get there, but some of the Web3 native IP, I think will have a chance to do that as well. Ticketing events is a huge one. You had the NBA selling these all-star VIP passes for, again, VIP experiences within their ecosystem. These were all auctioned off, one for every team. Coachella sold lifetime access to Coachella via their Keys collection. And then the Hundreds, which is a streetwear brand, has a collection called Atom Bomb Squad. And this is interesting because they also, that hoodie, NFTs are a scam. They did it for fun. It was a whole billboard campaign they had in New York City during NFT NYC last year, but they have physical versions of that as well. So they are really leaning into this whole, your digital avatar and your real self and dressing similarly. And they're providing collections to facilitate both. And they're a streetwear brand, so they already are known for really good apparel and partnerships. And then last but not least, in terms of the commerce component, this idea of a digital asset becoming a physical asset is important. So this was one of the shoes that Artifact Studios launched mid last year. This is a partnership with Jeff Staples, who's credited with probably being the father of sneakerhead movement. And that, if you held that NFT long enough, you were able to claim a physical version that was shipped to you. This is a really interesting concept. And again, they were able to develop the digital one fairly quickly. It took a long time to get the physical one sent. But the idea of, again, product development and launching, testing, seeing how the market reacts, and then doing something physical if and when it makes sense, this is now a possibility. These are just some thoughts. I won't go through all these, but these are just some things that I believe will be coming soon. Some of these prominent collections, I believe, are going to be the next talent and influencers. You're starting to see many of these collections get signed by traditional talent agencies. I just saw today, Deadfellas, which is a collection, got signed by UTA. Some of these other collections, like Bored Ape Yacht Club, are represented by major agencies as well for film, commercials, advertising, all the above. And some of them are going to certainly make it to the big screen. We talked about licensing deals. Traditional brands, I think, will build meaningful businesses in Web3, and many of them will partner with some of these collections. I joke around that I feel like everyone's looking for a dance partner at the moment. They're all trying to see what Web3 native project, really company, because that's what they are, most closely aligns with the value of your brand and your firm, and finding mutual ground there and creating something that's helpful for both. But anyways, I'll kind of end there. I know we have some questions, thoughts, but I'd love to dive into that, and I'm happy to answer anything you got.
Great job, Joel. I'm gonna feed you some questions, and I've got some of my own as well. A couple of these will be really simple to answer. You mentioned a book toward the beginning describing the vision for the metaverse. You said Ready Player One. Then you mentioned a book. What was the name of that book?
Yeah, so Snow Crash is the book. That's where the metaverse was originally coined. I believe the author of that book worked at Magic Leap years ago. If I remember correctly, he might have been like their futurist or something like that. But Snow Crash is the book, and then Ready Player One is it's a book, but it's also a movie.
Great. Another question here says, trying to wrap my mind around NFTs giving me access to experiences. Are those experiences all virtual in the metaverse, or can NFTs give me access to experiences in real life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an example that I'm going to participate in May, actually. So one of the NFTs, the one that I have from Artifact Studios, is going to give me access to a gallery event and experience at the Gagosian Museum with Takashi Murakami on May 11th. So because I'm a token holder of that, I get to participate in this IRL experience.
So another question talks about how all these big brands are jumping in. So many companies trying to own to the extent that they can the metaverse and Web3. Do you think corporate or brand investment is generally good or generally bad for the evolution of what's to come?
I think it's good. I think it's needed. I saw the mention around Facebook as well, or Meta, I suppose now. I'll touch on all that. So there's definitely a big debate at the moment in the space, in this whole centralized versus decentralized. The reality is you're going to have versions of both. Is Facebook coming into the space a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. I do think it's a little bit of a battle on, I think he's going to try to create a more closed ecosystem than the rest of the market would want. That's his business model. That's how he's built an empire. He has talked about having some decentralization, but they recently talked about 47.5% fees on creators for their NFTs. In this ecosystem, that's insane. I think the only person that takes a higher fee than that is Roblox. OpenSea, which is the Amazon of the NFT marketplace, takes a 2.5% fee for context, but they're spending 10 point something billion dollars, or $10.1 billion were allocated to metaverse investments last year, much less whatever they're going to do moving forward. That's across the ecosystem. So a lot of that will go towards developing the glasses he's talked about. That's going to be important. I don't think VR, like Oculus, I don't think that's the quote unquote solution to getting into the metaverse. I think some sort of AR experience where you're able to see things overlaid in front of you is a more realistic approach, but that might be more like 5 at best, maybe a decade out. That's going to take time and investments from companies like that. But I do think it's important to have traditional brands in the ecosystem bring their audiences, fan bases, and shoppers, and try to reimagine themselves. I think this is a really cool and interesting opportunity. I know there's a lot of new things here, but I think we have a really interesting opportunity to almost recognize and reward our fans and our shoppers, and finding ways to do that in a way that is beneficial for our businesses as well as them as a consumer. Hopefully, this is our opportunity to get them more engaged in our ecosystem.
I don't think Web 1 caught anyone off guard with respect to brands and retailers. But I don't think it was understood. I don't think it was maybe taken seriously in the early days. Are you seeing that kind of play out again with Web3, or do you think companies are taking it more seriously? They're making the appropriate investments. They're experimenting early. How would you compare Web3 to Web 1, even Web 2, with respect to how companies are engaging early?
It's a great question. I've seen a mixed bag of this, so truly all over the place. I think in some cases, those that missed e-com early are realizing they don't want to miss the next wave, so they're starting to at a minimum experiment with what's going on, because they realize, like, look, early on, this is interesting and almost comical in retrospect. You had some companies that were, e-com, all the direct to consumer, that's it. Like, you don't need in stores, and then just in stores, all that mattered. The reality is you needed both. Same thing's going to happen here. You're going to need not just the metaverse and virtual world, you're going to need the physical world as well. And those that are able to provide that experience, I think will do well. But we are in an element of testing. I would say being cautious and, almost skeptical is healthy. There's a lot of noise in the space, especially right now. But there are some real legitimate things happening. And I think it's a matter of taking baby steps. Don't, crawl, walk, run. But look, you're seeing some people dive in head first. I was surprised when I saw Fox, for example, develop a whole studio. I think they dedicated $600 million to developing that. Like, they're diving in head first right away.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned a lot of brands in your presentation. Companies that you've seen, experimenting and trying different things. Who are some of your favorite brands to follow that we should be watching as well?
There's a few. Adidas, early on, I really love their approach. I will say lately their communication has been slower, and I'll make a few comments to this. The reason I love their approach is they took a partnership approach. Despite the fact that they're a global multi-billion-dollar firm, they didn't just say, oh, we're going to do our own thing because we're Adidas and we can do whatever we want. They took an approach of, we believe we can offer a lot to this ecosystem, but we want to learn from this ecosystem. It was really humble. They talked to people locally and or in those communities, G Money being one of them, and then the punks. And then they found a way to add value to that community first and learn through that, and then build out the ecosystem that way. So I love the way Adidas started. I'm not sure where they're going to go. I like what Nike is doing via Artifact Studios, but they're not currently taking a super hands-on approach publicly. Beyond those two, despite the fact that Pepsi got criticized early on for what they did, I believe Pepsi will come back really strong. Todd Kaplan is doing a lot of really interesting things, and he certainly has an interesting crew helping him do all that with Vayner NFT.
Another great question that kind of takes what I just asked, another level. Who are some of the other people that we can connect with on LinkedIn or on Twitter that we should be paying attention to? Maybe not folks that are developing theory as much as practitioners that have rolled up their sleeves and are in it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good ones. Avery Akemi she's the president of Vayner NFT, is a really good one to follow. Kathy Hackle is a really good one. She gets on the theory side of things, but she certainly gets on the practitioner side as well. She's probably one of the, I think, best entry points that I've seen. Matthew Ball is certainly more conceptual, but it's probably one of the deepest thinkers in the space. Punk 6529 is one of the most crypto native voices you'll hear, but he's a very deep thinker as well. And there's a really good interview. It's admittedly a long interview, but he just did an interview with RuPaul. That's about a 2-hour long interview. It's pure gold.
Good stuff. I don't see any other questions. Joel, this has been so good as an introduction. So thank you so much for pulling this together. And the folks that are with us and the folks that watch us later on video, like I said, we're wanting to create a community within the community, people that are really curious, companies that are looking for opportunities to experiment, and while this is still being formed. So I hope that you'll tune in for our future conversations with Joel. I hope you'll tell your contemporaries, your peer group within the community. I'd love to see this grow and grow. So Joel, any other closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just appreciate the time and the opportunity. This is really exciting. I dove into this space, frankly, just chasing curiosity. The first time I read about virtual land, I thought it was insane. And then I started connecting the dots, and it's been a fun journey. And, having worked in this shopper marketing ecosystem for the last decade, I'm certainly thinking a lot about, what does advertising look like in this space? What does the future of commerce look like in this space? And how can we take the brands that we work on into this ecosystem in a way that is embraced and also adds value? I think just having an open mind and just absorbing information, I think you learn by doing. So that's certainly what I did, and that's what I would recommend everyone do.
Yeah, I seem like I say this about once a week nowadays, but it's such an exciting time to be alive, to be working in the space, to be a student of all the things that change just continues to accelerate. So again, thank you so much, Joel. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, my sense is you'd want them to connect with you on LinkedIn, where you're very active.
Yeah, LinkedIn would definitely be the best place. So you can just find me, Joel Ponce, on LinkedIn.
All right, Joel, thank you so much. Look forward to talking with you again soon. Everyone have a great day.